Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Heroes Mindset podcast. Today, I have on Donovan Russo, the author of Stephen's War. It's great to have you on.
Hey Nick, how are you? Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, this podcast is mostly going to be about superheroes. This podcast is mostly be about what inspires people about superheroes. And you know what? Why do
Okay.
people like Endgame? Why do people like Disney movies, right? Why do we grow up on this stuff, and why do we love this stuff? And a lot of it also has to do with religion. Why do we love religion? It just makes no sense. So I
Right.
do want to hear how you grew up with superheroes. You grew up with like comic books, things that really inspired you. And I really want to know your origin story. What was it that really inspired you to how did superheroes have an effect on your life?
Yeah, man. So I specifically remember, or I guess growing up, I specifically remember my dad taking me to see the original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire back when I was
Yeah.
in kindergarten. And I remember that opening my eyes and changing my world, seeing what could be created within cinematography, but also a story about this teenage kid who's, he's a working class guy, he's got his struggles, he's not popular, he's not cool, and he gets, you know, you know, cursed with these powers, which really is a blessing in disguise. And he goes on these extraordinary adventures, and it's really a story of a child becoming a man. And
Yeah.
I just resonated with that for years. And no matter what age you are, I mean, the Spider-Man character could inspire you in terms, because I think we all endure those moments of fear and trying to figure out, how do we find braveness from within, and how do we get to where we want to be, and how do we take that leap. So I really resonated with Spider-Man and with that. And then, you know, throughout the years, there's been several other great, comic book motion pictures. You think of, 2008 with both Iron Man and The Dark Knight. I mean,
Yeah.
Iron Man kicks off Iron Man kicks off the entire MCU, and then you have The Dark Knight, which was just, it's my favorite movie of all time, not superhero movie of all time. And obviously Christian Bale is phenomenal as Batman, but Heath Ledger, I mean, he totally takes on an extraordinary approach with the Joker, and it was just phenomenal movie. I love that movie to pieces, and I thought The Dark Knight Rises was as good as it can get in terms of a follow up to that. The Avengers was, again, that was another legendary movie that brought together all these characters for the first time like that. And I thought Josh Whedon's approach was really brilliant, where he's kind of making like this kind of nuclear family that's dysfunctional. And it's really a story about that. And that to me really relate, I like those kinds of stories, because I like character driven stuff. And that's definitely how I wrote Stephen's War, which is, my book. I wanted to really prioritize the character and, have the plot take a backseat to who Stephen is. And
Yeah.
I really wanted to prioritize getting the reader to, empathize with Stephen Cahill's my protagonist, and also to want to hear his story, you know.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I mean, so then after that, you look at what Marvel and DC has done. You look at, Captain America: Civil War. You look at, Avengers: Infinity War, Avengers: Endgame. And the DC side, I thought Batman vs Superman. I thought Batman vs Superman had some cool moments in it. Man, I thought Zack Snyder's Man of Steel
Absolutely.
was actually really, yeah, I thought Man of Steel was really interesting too. And obviously now I'm super pumped for the Snyder cut. I'm super pumped for the new Batman movie.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this new Spider-Man 3. That I feel like we can talk for hours on that.
Yeah. No, I mean it's true. I think like all these movies that are coming out, they've really found a way for them to hit, right? Like I right now I'm actually as we're speaking, I'm going through the Dark Knight movie to understand like why the hell it's so good. It's probably like the fourth time I've watched this movie. And
Right.
same thing for the Marvel universe. I'm actually I'm going through it, and I think it's just so important to just understand like what is it that is actually so inspiring about these movies, right? Why will we waste 3 hours of
Right.
our
Right.
time
Right.
to sit and watch Endgame? Why is Avengers Endgame the biggest blockbuster movie of all time when it's just people? Stan Lee said it the best. He said, "People who have powers that we never will have, and yeah, we want to be them. It's like what is the infatuation there? And I do want to ask. I think this is such an interesting question. Do you think superheroes, right, or comic books, or anything like that, has had a tangible effect on your life?
Yes, absolutely. I think for one, I mean, growing up with characters like Spider-Man, Batman, Iron Man, whoever it is, you see their integrity, right? You see who they are at their best. And I think that certainly inspired me, wanted me want to be the best that I could be, and save others. Obviously, saving in different ways. I mean, I'm not saving anybody from falling buildings, but I think
Mhm.
inspiring, and trying to be a good leader and a good friend and a good family member, a good community member, right? So I think that absolutely, absolutely, seeing superheroes, seeing the good guys made me want to become a good guy as I grew older.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part. I feel like it does translate. Like I once I got into superheroes, and I got to say I did get into it a little bit late. But once I did get into them, I felt like my
How old
life
were you when you
just
got into it?
I must have been 15, 16, something like that. I
Oh
always,
wow. Okay.
yeah, like my whole life, never read Harry Potter, never loved Star Wars, always kind of liked Star Wars.
Uh,
But then something kind of like rejuvenated in me where I watched a movie. And I was just, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was external, like I watched this movie and it changed my life, but I started appreciating them. I started like looking at
So
them and
you
being,
don't know what movie it was?
it could have been The Lion King. The Lion King had, why is it, it's like a story about lions and it's the 13th most selling movie of all time.
Yeah.
That one I watched and it had a profound effect on me. But at the same time, it's like, I think a lot of it was just like I remember I was like 15 years old or whenever Endgame came out, I watched Endgame and it really didn't have that much of an effect on me. It really didn't. I was like, all right, whatever. Like this isn't that much. And then once I started looking at them like this isn't some fantasy. This isn't some like unrealistic idea. Instead, it's some basic human framework, right? It's instead of
Right.
looking at Iron Man as the person that we can't be, you could look at him as someone that is the person that we have the potential to be in terms of our character. And when I saw that once that sort of flicked in me, and I think Lion King tricked that off. It might have, but I can't even guarantee that. Then everything changed for me.
Interesting. That was Lion King. Um, but yeah, but totally going back to Iron Man and all that. He's the character that, look, we all have flaws. We've all had moments that we're not proud of. And I think that he is supposed to symbolize um, just how possible it is to redeem yourself.
Yeah,
So that's, yeah, I think maybe that's where some of that love comes from. Plus, Downey Jr., he just played the character with such sass and authority.
yeah.
So that was
Well,
really interesting too.
I think it's really cool. They said in which movie was it? It was in Age of Ultron, Avengers: Age of Ultron. They called it was Hawkeye's wife. He called the Avengers gods. And I truly believe that. I think that they are our modern day gods because I mean, what is the difference between, um what is the difference between, let's say, any of our polytheistic Greek gods that everybody, like the Poseidon and Zeus and all these people and our Avengers, right? They're all people that are come from some mystical place, have this tremendous power that we'll never be able to achieve, and we admire them and we admire their character and we make stories about them. They're so similar, and I do wonder whether or not they actually, um, there's sort of a gap. And I think that's a great question to ask. Do you think that there is sort of like a gap in terms of seeing someone like Robert Downey Jr. and saying he's too perfect, right? Like if you see a character and you see how amazing they are, like this god, do you think people often, and I think this is a big reason why people don't get into the superhero genre, they detach from it. They're saying, I can never be Iron Man. That's too unrealistic. That's just mythology. And they just never get into it.
Well, I think, dig a bit deeper with your question, I think some of the box office numbers show this, where you look at a character like Superman, who literally is like indestructible, right? I mean,
Yeah.
kryptonite, yeah, but I mean, he's not. If Captain America gets shot, he's still going to go down, no matter how strong he is.
Yeah.
But Superman, it's different. And I think, going back to your question of, is there a thing is too much perfection? Yeah, I do think there is that, and it creates a character that's not as relatable. I mean, you look at something like Captain America: The First Avenger, right?
Hmm.
The movie did okay at the box office. I mean, I think it made around a little over 300 million worldwide, but it didn't have the success that Winter Soldier or Civil War did.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it had to do with those movies raising the stakes, and more characters involved, in the MCU gaining more notoriety. But at the same time, what I think makes those movies that much better is the fact that they continuously push Captain America against his moral code. And that's kind of an interesting angle to take when you have that pitch perfect character, and that's something with Superman, who I think they ought to explore more. Is the only person who could really beat Superman is himself. I think it'd be
Yeah.
worth exploring, him going against his moral code, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, just like they did with, the Captain America movies, which made him a much more dynamic character.
Well, no, I agree. I think, when you think of Captain America, you think of him as like the traditional hero. He's like
Right,
the
right,
he's like the normal guy that, is going to stand for America, and he's going to do that. And that's what they portrayed in the first Avenger, right? In the first Captain America movie. But at the same
right.
time, I personally believe, and I think as our society changes, our heroes are changing, actually. Right? Like our heroes are evolving with the times. They have different moral codes. They have different ways of viewing the world, and you actually see that. So I'll give a recap, right? So in the Winter Soldier, right, there's this crazy idea, right, that a hero shouldn't kill the villain, right? Like you look at
Right,
since
yeah.
since the beginning of time, we had heroes slaying dragons, right? That was the
Hmm.
thing. And then once people became a little bit more sophisticated, it was people killing people, right? Harry Potter kills Voldemort, the Avengers kill Thanos, right? Like the goal is not to rehabilitate, it's to kill. And I think that's such a it could be considered an archaic view, right? If you're looking at this from a strictly literal perspective, you could say, why are you trying to kill your enemies, right? Like, Jesus says, love thine enemies, right? Like there's that sort of um difference between the two. And I think in Captain America Winter Soldier and also Batman, right? Like that's Batman's thing.
Right.
Batman, they don't kill their villain, right? And there's such a fine line between that. And I always wonder whether or not it has a big effect.
No, yeah, totally, totally. I mean, well, it's the thing that separates the good guys from the bad guys, right? I mean, you look at so many interesting villains, right? I mean, whether I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, even like someone like the Joker. I mean, the Joker, in the Dark Knight, we'll go back to that for a second. His main agenda is to prove that everybody's as bad as he is, and that if you push somebody hard enough, they're going to snap,
Yeah.
right? And the reason he likes Batman so much is because Batman has this moral code of, he'll beat his criminals, but he won't kill them. And I think the Joker, you know, part of what he wanted to do is prove that Batman just one bad day away from being him. I mean, he
Yeah.
proves that with the Harvey Dent character. But so I think that's kind of what you're getting at, which, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it is super cool. And I just it has such a big effect on our lives, right? So like in The Dark Knight, what they did was a social experiment where you have two people, you
Right.
have the civilians on one boat and the prisoners on the other boat. And literally you're just sitting there and each of them has a bomb that will blow up the other person's boat. And the Joker is literally just saying, you know what? Who's going to press the button first? Right? And you know, we hope. Yeah, I think it is really nice. Like it restores our faith in humanity. Like that humans can be above because obviously nobody blows each other up. It would be a pretty messed up movie if it ended like that.
Right.
But it really gives a sense of hope and humanity, right? Like and that's what heroes are for, you know, that good can triumph over evil.
Right.
But
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
there
totally.
you
What
go.
the Joker was trying to do was create ugliness, and he failed.
Yeah,
No, no,
exactly.
yeah, I was disagreeing with you. That's all.
so I did want to get into your book, Stephen's War. I think your character that you wrote is super interesting. For anyone interested, his link to his new book is down in the description below. It will definitely be there. Um, so first, tell us about Stephen's War. Tell us what inspired you to write it, and then also give us a little understanding of the universality of it. Like why is this actually important?
Right, right. Yeah. So I think in terms of why I wanted to write it was it goes back to my love of the genre. I want add to this beautiful community. That's really what I wanted to do is I wanted to, I think of it as like my love letter to it, right? It's a fictional story, obviously, but it's a way of thank you to all those who made Batman wonderful and the Marvel wonderful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Um, but so but the one thing I wanted to do was, I was thinking of how can I create something different. And I said, well, in the world, in the media industry as a whole, we have seen, a lack of LGBTQ characters, right? So I was like, okay, well,
Hmm.
here's an opportunity for me to create something that's different. We don't see too many LGBT vigilantes. So that's kind of from the business point of view is here's, a different marketing approach, but from a artistic point of view, and allowed me to get a lot deeper with the characters, his characterization, Stephen Cahill's characterization, where I got to, dig deeper into who he is internally and the struggles he has with accepting his sexuality, accepting who he is as an individual, and redefining what masculinity means, and evaluating the sense of heteronormativity that we all live in. And I placed this story specifically in 2009 during the Don't Ask, Don't Tarry, which basically said that if you were gay, if you get caught, basically it said that you're allowed to be gay unless you get caught. If you get caught by your superior, you very well may get kicked out of the military. So I really explore that, and Stephen Cahill, my main character, he falls in love with another Marine. They can't really come out about their relationship. Some stuff happens that sends Stephen home, where he's grieving the loss of someone who's important to him. um, he loses somebody else, and that kind of is what ticks him over the edge. And it's really, I like to think of it as part one of the story is like this ticking time bomb where I'm kind of examining just how much this guy can take before he snaps and embraces this whole vigilante identity. Part two is kind of this, it's kind of this double-edged sword type of narrative type of thing. I don't want to give too much away about that.
Yeah,
Part
definitely
th-
don't.
but part three is a redemption story. So
Mm.
it's told in three parts, and it's very character driven. While it's marketed as this LGBT vigilante story, it really, at its core, is a story about a man just trying to figure it out and who he is and who he wants to be. So
Yeah, I think one of the biggest theme across all the superhero movies is that all of them, I would say almost all of them, are maturity stories. They're all maturity stories. It's
right.
all, coming into your own and accepting who you are. Because I think, you know what, there's a need for that, right? Like people, especially children, especially teenagers, especially young adults, they don't know who they are, right? They have no idea. They haven't really figured it all out yet. And I think it's so interesting having someone who's LGBTQ. The question is, and this is the thing. Do you expect a lot of LGBTQ people to read your book? And the question is why, right? Like why would someone identify with Steven?
Right. Well, whether you're gay or not, I mean, this is a character that I think anybody can relate to because we all of us have issues balancing, our individuality with, what society expects us to be. We all have those issues. We all have demons we're trying to fight. we all have things that we're trying to accept in our lives, especially right now with this pandemic. So I definitely think this is a character who, you know, certainly his story conveys a sense of acceptance, and you know, he endures pain, and it's, you know, he certainly could be a source of inspiration for how to, you know, how to overcome your losses, you know,
Yeah.
and how to find your way. But in terms of your first question, yeah, you know, I was able to establish, you know, promotional partnerships with GLAAD, which they're one of the biggest LGBT organizations in the country, and then the New Jersey LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Have gotten really close to them. I did a nice webinar with them about a week and a half ago.
Mm.
So yeah, no, it's been great, and that's probably the best part of this whole process, is getting the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people, just like you know, just, you know, getting to do this podcast with you now. You know, I have a new friend, you know, so
Yeah.
that's always the best part, is being able to create new friendships.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's so much. I think that's the best part. You know, when we read stuff like fiction, when we read stuff like superheroes, it takes us into let me I'm gonna call it the realm of the spirit, if that makes sense. You know,
Right.
it takes us into something that is so beyond our rational understanding of the world, because movies aren't rational. You know, our culture has an affinity with music, right? We love to call ourselves rational, but at the same time we spend all our time listening to music, which is just the least rational thing ever. It's like, why do you like just a bunch of piano keys touching, you know, like making a sound? But at the same time, it has this resonation with us. And I do think that taking someone, right, like in Guardians of the Galaxy, there's Star Lord, you know, now he's an
Right.
LGBTQ character, right? And when you have people like that, like those, it really allows people to be like, you know what, maybe I could be a hero, just like, you know, just like Steven and just like Star Lord.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we always look for the flaws in characters, because, you know, a lot of times we can identify those flaws, and seeing characters overcome them. And that's not me saying like being an LGBT is a flaw. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying just things in general, like
Well,
alcoholism or
society, yeah,
extreme
society looks down
rage.
on them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, or rage, or, you know, being insecure, you know, having some form of PTSD. Those are all things that, you know, we look at as, you know, flaws, things that need to be fixed, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, so but relating back to the LGBT thing, I think, you know, I think it's good for everybody to have characters that relate to them, you know, and who go through some of the same things they go through, like trying to, you know, embrace who they are, and, you know, accept who they are, and not be afraid to be like, yeah, this is who I am, and if you don't like it, well, that's your loss, you know. So I think that's it's good from both perspectives.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think being LGBTQ, it's just another thing, right? Like it's just another um f- individual piece of everybody that we need to understand, right? So for example, like
Right.
everybody has to choose a career, right? If I want to choose a career, I am making an individual choice, and I am, you know, choosing a nonconformist approach, right? If I want to be an artist instead of an accountant, right, then I'm choosing an individual approach. I'm breaking away from the pack, being nonconformist, right? Being LGBTQ is just another variation of that. It's like, you know, at first I need to understand who I am, and second of all, I need to, you know, follow my truth. And I think that idea, while it's perfectly displayed in LGBTQ, at the same time, it's a universal idea.
Well, yeah, I think too. I mean, I think people just need to be accepting of, you know, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't, you know, and that's kind of one of the things that I want to take away in this book is, you know, while my main character Stephen is gay, that
Mhm.
doesn't define him, you know, and that's one of the things I want to take away, is that I wanted to kind of scrape away at some of those stereotypes, and I wanted to show that he's, you know, you could be a superhero and be a part of the LGBTQ community. It doesn't define you. There shouldn't be any restrictions. There shouldn't be, you know, I wanted to redefine what the word hero means, and, you know, what the word masculinity means, and That was really important to
Mm.
me when writing this. I wanted to show that anybody could be a hero. It doesn't matter, whether you're blue, green, yellow, gay, straight, bi, whatever it is. It's more about who you are on the inside.
So here's the question that I have been struggling with, and I think you might be able to answer this. All of the heroes, when I look at them, are traditionally masculine, right? Like you look at the
Right.
main three: Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man and Marvel. Batman, Superman, like traditionally masculine. Then you look at someone like Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, I describe this to my friends when I watch Captain Marvel. I say Captain Marvel is just a man's traits. Like, she is Captain America, or she's literally just an amalgamation of masculine traits, right? She's feminine, but she has these masculine traits that all the other superheroes have. And I don't think that they did a good job with Captain Marvel showing off femininity, right? I think they did a good job with Black Widow showing off femininity. But at the same time, I don't think they did that with Captain Marvel. So at the same time, most of the heroes that we see are traditionally masculine people, right? Do you think that's part of our biological framework? Do you think that we naturally pursue and admire these masculine heroes, or do you think that we can start, liking feminine heroes?
Well, I think it goes. I think it kind of goes back to, you know, the way we're raised and the cultures we're a part of. I mean, we're conditioned very young, to believe in certain stereotypes. Boys don't cry. Girls play with dolls. I think it all goes back to those lessons. And it goes, to the things we read, the things we watch, the things we sing. It's so I think it's enrooted within us. But I think as a society, we're getting more sophisticated. We're getting more aware, and we're reevaluating, we're redefining what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of time we're kind of destigmatizing those stereotypes.
Yeah, no, I mean, we spend a lot of
Makes
time.
sense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a I'm big into psychology. The book that I just wrote is all about psychology. So I mean, literally, like, the fundamental debate is nature versus nature, nature versus nurture. It's like, which one is it? It's like, are we hardwired to be like this, or at the same time, is it just a societal construct? Is it something that we've established over the years and sort of, put man and female into these roles? And it's just such a hard question to answer, right? Like, you look at all of our heroes from the past, right? Take Odysseus from ancient Rome, right?
Right.
You look at Odysseus, and he was a masculine hero, your traditionally masculine hero, and I wonder whether or not that's going to be able to change, right? You look at someone like Star Lord, right? Star Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy is the main hero in Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt, and literally he's we were like I was watching it with my mom, and we're just sitting there, we're like, that is a feminine hero. That is a hero who who listens to music, right, is very emotional, right, is nothing like your hard, Iron Man, Captain America. So I do wonder whether or not that will be able to sort of get into the mix, and people will be able to like it because people love Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, then hasn't it already then? Because those movies have done rather well, right? So maybe that shows that there is, and we could have men who are more feminine in terms of their characters, just like women. You said that you said that you thought Captain Marvel was rather masculine. Maybe why can't there be switches? Maybe
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, I think when you look at a feminine hero versus a feminine female hero versus a masculine male hero, right? Like, they're definitely two different types of people, right? Like, you look at someone like Black Widow, and it's scary because she's a feminine hero, but at the same time, like, she's a hero, but she embraces her sexuality, right? That's a huge thing, right? Like she lures men in, right? With like she lures men in based off their, like they try to pursue her, and then she jumps on them and knocks them out and stuff like that, right? Like that's her character. But at the same time,
Right.
she's a hard ass, right? Like you don't want to mess with her, and she's what we think of as a hero. So you have that side, but then when you think of a masculine hero, it's not really like that. You just have, the strong person. Like it is very little to do with sexuality. It's so there's definitely a difference between the male and female hero. I'll definitely say that, right? Even when you look at like the ideals in that way. But at the same time, I do think that there's going to be some sort of reconciliation, as in Black Widow, Captain Marvel, and Iron Man and Captain America all have very similar traits across the board.
Well, yeah, they do. There are certainly different about them too, but you know, it, that's what makes them interesting, though. Is that is being able to dissect. Okay, here's why they get along, and here's why they don't see eye to eye in certain subjects. That's part of
Yeah,
the fun, I think.
yeah. No, I think it is fun because you know what? You look at Captain America: Civil War, right? Or even you look at Avengers, right? Like Avengers, all they do is fight, right? All they do is fight, and
Right.
I think that's relatable. That's the thing. It's like when you have all these,
Yeah.
when you have people coming together, you're gonna have fights. You're gonna have people who are disagreeing with each other, and it it also gives you a great framework. That's what I find is the best part. It's like you know we run this simulation of, okay, like the simulation in our brain. It's like, is this movie realistic, right? In terms of the lessons that it proves and all that. And their answer was unite under a common goal, and that will push you forward, right? If we are just a bunch of vigilantes
Right.
being put together, but at the same time, if you unite us under, all right, we have to save the world, we have to do something that's good for humanity, then you're going to be able to then you're going to be able to bring it together. We run through that simulation in our mind and saying, is this realistic? And you know what? I think the answer is an unequivocal yes.
No, totally. I think that's really well said. Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's relatable because we look at our families and our friends. It's not always smooth sailing. I think that's what it relates back to. Is, we see our families and friends within these, especially within like these groups like the Avengers or the Justice League.
Yeah. So I must ask you a question, and this one really gets into,
Yeah, of course.
it's just it's so important, right? Like this is the fundamental question of stories, right? Do the arts and do stories, how do they push society forward, right? Especially in something with an LGBTQ book, how do they um really change the way that we think about society, even though it's such an abstract, stories are such an abstract concept.
Yeah, well, I think it allows you to see different perspectives on life. I think that's the biggest way. Um, relating back to my book, um, I wanted to really show what is it like to be an outcast. And obviously, look, we're all outcasts in our unique ways, but I wanted to show specifically how, these overly masculine expectations within the military, within society, how that could impact someone, and their inability to feel comfortable around the ones that they love, and the ones who love them the most.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show that expected that I wanted to show that perspective, if that makes sense. I wanted to show that, hey, an LGBTQ character can be just as much as a kick-ass vigilante as a heterosexual vigilante.
Yeah.
So, and that they could be just as tough, quote unquote. So it's one of those
Yeah.
things where I just wanted to show that it doesn't just start and end with one category, one one specification. You know what I mean? That
Yeah. No, well,
these
that's the
these
thing.
heroes could be anyone.
Well, that's the thing, dude. You're sitting there writing your book, and you are literally redefining a cultural norm, right? That's what you're doing, right? Like you're literally sitting there and saying there's this thing that has existed for 2,000 years called Christianity, right? And in the Bible, it says we should, you should not be gay. You should be stoned to death if you're gay. It is a sin to be gay. And um, and you were saying, right, like in your book, first of all, that was arts, that was stories, that was something that pushed forward, that changed society. And now we have people, people like Donovan Russo coming along and saying, no, wait, guys, we should rethink that, right? Like this is something that needs to be considered a little bit more deeply. And I think it's powerful, right? Like it's a rejection of Christianity, right? Like you took on a big task, but maybe without even like
Well,
realizing it. But yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I mean, it's very flattering that you're creating as if I have that much influence. So thank you for that. But I think that I wouldn't, look. I mean, in my book, I certainly talk about Christianity. I talk, from the characters' perspectives, how how they feel alienated from it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't say the book's necessarily a rejection of Christianity, more of a critique, you know?
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah.
of a critique. And, but I think, there's so many different, from that perspective, there's a lot of different, stories and movies, books that are doing that as well, I think a lot of people are taking the Catholic Church right now,
Yeah.
and it's a good thing because religion is important and Christianity is important, but what's not right is saying that you know you can't be gay, you can't do this because it goes against. I mean, my whole thing is that the Bible. I don't know. I think that I just think it's important. I'll say this. I just think it's important not to alienate diverse people who are different than others. I just don't think it's fair. I mean, because doesn't the church also says too, love thy neighbor,
Yeah.
and you don't see a lot of that. And sometimes I think people use religion as a scapegoat for hate. They
Yeah.
use it as an opportunity to spew hate. And I certainly talk about that in the book. I certainly critique that. In the voice of the characters, I certainly voice those frustrations. But yeah,
Hey,
that's
listen.
that's what I'll
Yeah.
say.
No, dude. Listen, dude, we are a full frontal podcast, so you know what? It's all right. Feel free to say whatever, but I mean, here's my take on it, and I think it parallels yours. You have a character called named Mr. Simone, and Mr. Simone is the representation of the
Right.
Catholic Church, right? Like Mr. Simone. To give a nice little synopsis, you find this out in the beginning of the book. Um, he is somebody who is hard. He says,
Right. Right.
homosexuality is bad. Like, guys, stop doing this. This is awful. But at the same time, he has a double life. He has a double life, as in he does it himself. And
Yeah.
he's right, and it's messed up, right? Because I find this actually. I just read a book. It's called Out of the Shadows: Understanding Sexual Addiction, and literally the entire book is how we live this double life. People um literally are living a life of, all right, this is my public face, but then they will never show the sexual side of them. They will never show this repressed version of them, you know? And man, talk about the Catholic Church, right? Like it's withered within the entire Catholic Church. You have the priests who stand up on their pedestal saying, "You know what? This is me," but at the same time they have this life where they're abusing kids, and obviously this isn't all of them, but you have
Right.
these priests
Right.
did not seem like they were doing it. They literally completely dissociated their life. And you're saying that and I think it's a great argument that Christianity does that. When you repress such a side of yourself, right? If you repress your
Yeah.
homosexuality, you repress your sexuality, then that's what's going to result.
Yeah. No, I think for one, within the book and that Mr. Simone thing, that was when I wrote that was a late addition to my editing process. That was like more towards the end when I was really I wanted to punch up that first chapter a bit and really kind of
Yeah.
reshape it. And I just used a lot of satire in my writing, and I wanted to show because we all know those people in our lives who are super judgmental, super overly masculine, and they're just hiding. You
Yeah.
can't they can't fool us. We all know they're full of it. Um, but so I want to show that a little bit and kind of just poke fun of some of those jokesters in society. You know what I mean? Those people we all know. But yeah, to your point, as I said before, I really wanted to show how some of these some of these stigmas in the Catholic Church and just religion as a whole, how they impact people that they alienate and what that makes them feel. Because it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not cool. And yeah, so that certainly plays a part in the book, for
Yeah,
sure.
and also I think it's repressive, right? Like I think it's repressive, and this is my critique of the Catholic Church. Obviously I was raised Catholic, and I was
Yeah,
sitting.
same.
Yeah, no, I mean it kills me because I spent a good year of my life saying I'm gonna be abstinent, right? Like I'm gonna abstain from sex and hooking up with girls and masturbation, all these things. And literally I'm sitting there, and then I looked at a stat. I looked at a stat. 88% of those people who commit themselves to abstinence do not follow through. 88%. And when you look at that, you must ask the question, is sexuality something that can be controlled, right? They are at those people who abstain from sex are actually more likely to do oral and anal sex, more likely, and that's than the average person. This is we're talking about teenagers and young adults here, and it's just such a huge question as to, oh sorry, it's just such a huge question as to um why the church is repressive in such a manner.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it just goes back to wanting to maintain control, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and wanting your devotion, love to be to them. I mean, but I mean, look, I mean, not all religion is bad, and I certainly in the book, I mean, that's not the message I'm trying to get across is that the Catholic Church is evil. It's just to kind of point out some of the hypocrisies to it.
yeah. No, I mean, listen, why not? Why
Yeah.
not? Honestly, it's it's um
Right.
it's definitely a flawed system. You're never gonna have it perfect. You're never gonna have it perfect. But I think especially right when you look at the thing that alienates so many people from the church nowadays. I think the number one thing is homosexuality. Number one thing. It's like, come on, like we have love thy neighbor, we have all this stuff. Like the church really can't just go in and be like, let's just accept these people.
Right, right. No, absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me ask you, switching gears a little bit. Steven, this hero, is trying to figure himself out. He's 19 years old. He's a 19-year-old hero. I do want to get into the writing process a little bit. Do you,
Sure.
as a 23-year-old, 23-year-old, do you see yourself a little bit in him as you were writing? Were you really thinking, this guy is like his character traits, and maybe not all of them, maybe just some of them are sort of a reflection of me.
Yeah, well, I think, and I've written a couple of screenplays, and I think in any character I write, the good characters, the bad characters, there's always a bit of you in each character you write. Even, the main antagonist in this book, Frank Payne, is just, hot-tempered mobster guy. There's a little bit of me in there too, where the vulnerability and the anxiety and things of that nature, of course, and that's absolutely, and that's one of the things I wanted to show in the book is both Stephen and Frank's vulnerabilities. I wanted to show that Frank Payne, while he does things that we certainly aren't proud of and things that Stephen wants to stop, I wanted to show that Frank, he's also kind of a victim of his environment. He's a product of his environment, and he had a rough dad. His mother died young, and he had kind of bad influences around him. And I wanted to show that deep inside he's this broken, hurt little boy, just like Stephen is. And he was only one or two. He only took one or two bad turns that kind of separates him from Stephen.
Hmm, interesting. But do they have a similar background?
Yeah, no, they both grew up in Salem City, which is the main setting for my book.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think it really that's an interesting way of showing, like two of the same exact people, right? Two people who were born in the same situation, same neighborhood, same life struggles could just one could live an amazing life and one could live a terrible one.
Right, and that's kind of one of the point of views in the book. Frank believes that he's a hero to this city because he provides them at work. Um, you know, uh, on the surface, he creates tons of jobs through his construction companies, through his restaurants.
Yeah.
But even in the black market, he's sitting there and he's providing drugs and weapons, and again, he believes, well, I'm providing work to these people. I'm feeding families. Um, while Steven's point of view is, yeah, this guy may be feeding families, and what's the cost? It's costing
Mm,
teenagers their lives because they're getting hooked on drugs. It's causing madness, and these
yeah.
people, they're spending all their money on booze and alcohol, booze and drugs. So it's you're not creating liberation, or you're not creating this sustainable economic environment. Rather, you're creating this underground dictatorship. That's really what it is.
Mm,
So that those are some of the different points of views in the book. And that doesn't mean Steven's perfect. He certainly does some things in the story that you can look at and go, yeah, that wasn't the smartest move, or that was selfish.
yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I think that Steven has a little bit better of an understanding of the world than Frank does in some aspects.
So as you're actually sitting there writing this book, are you sort of how did you create it? Are you sitting there sort of consciously creating characters and saying, okay, I need a character who fulfills X role. I need a character who fulfills X role. Or is it a little bit more intuitive? Is it a little bit more like, pops into your head and you're just like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe if this character was like that, then it would complement this, like, is it more, what was sort of the process of writing like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. I mean, my process is I did about four versions of an outline last January, where because I needed a bit of a roadmap to take me to, okay, where am I going from here and here. And so
Mhm.
the book's 30 chapters, and I got to a good outline, 28 chapters. 28 chapters, like, okay, I feel like I can get started with this, and then I'll figure out the last two as I go. And the last two, they basically just felt very natural where I was going.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of the character, I knew for a while that I wanted to do something like this. I've written, as I said, I've written a few screenplays. I knew I wanted to dabble within this comic book superhero genre. So, and I knew that this was a story that I wanted to tell, with an LGBT twist, and kind of a daredevil, Batman type of character, Street Fighter, gritty,
Yeah.
ex-Marine. I knew that was also something that was stuff that was important to me. But so there were certain things that they very well did just come on the spot. Like you mentioned the Mr. Simone, that Mr. Simone character, right?
Yeah.
Who he's only in the first chapter. It's supposed to be just for a quick laugh, but that's
Okay.
something that I couldn't possibly have outlined or prepared for. That was more in the moment. Like, let me punch this up. Let me kind of show how wacky and ironic this city is, and let's put a
Yeah.
character in here like that. And there's tons of different things in this book where I do something like that. And I think, look, I mean, I think that kind of shows more of the reality of the creative process, where I think outline is good because you want to be prepared, but the
Yeah.
true magic is in the writing and the editing. Those things, the creative process. I mean, your creative abilities, they're it's impossible to know just how much you can do, because it's really, I mean, once you're just in that mode, you're going. Like,
Yeah.
even like right now with your podcast, I'm sure there's been a question. I'm sure you had some planned questions, but I'm sure stuff kind of came up when you're talking, and you said, well, let me actually pivot and do
All
this
right.
instead. And
Yep.
that's probably, even with your book, I'm sure there's things just like that, just like with mine, where let me explore this direction because this is interesting. This seems cool. So
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. It's something that's so um powerful in terms of, right now, if you look at we were talking about Marvel has their movies planned, like the movies and how they relate to each other up until 2040. It's 2020 right now. They have 20 years worth of
2040.
movies. 2040. Yep. They have all of them planned. They know exactly how it's going to go. And
I did not know that. Wow.
yeah, they're just so ahead of their shit. You know, they have like you're saying, they have outlines, right? They have, this is how it's going to go. But at the same time, there's no chance, this is speculation, but there's no chance that they have each detail of each movie planned. It's like, no, that's the director's job. That's the job of the creator to come in and be like, all right, this is art. I'm going to go in and create the art. So it definitely goes both ways in terms of figuring out, and um one has to be very, very cognitive based. You have to plan, you have to sketch it out, you have to do all these things. But at the same time, this is an artistic process. Creating art is just incredible. I bet you, as you were writing, do you picture them? Like, are you literally seeing Steven? Are you seeing all these characters?
Yeah, totally. A lot of the times I see actors. That's how I see the characters. So I'm seeing an actor that I like, playing that character and talking as that character, literally, doing things as that character.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, no, trying to understand it. I think um putting yourself, that I think that's the toughest part, putting yourself in that you know framework, right? Like, the whole point of a story is for it to be relatable, right? Imagine if you wrote a story and the hero was just not human, right? Like, I think that's the problem with Superman, right? Superman is not human, right? He's not vulnerable. He's not, he's too perfect, right? And the problem with being too perfect is that he can't relate to the characters, right? He can't relate to the people watching, right? And I think that's the biggest problem. It's like, now we're just looking at this random dude who's perfect. Why do I care about him? But at the same time, when you have something like, essentially what you're doing is method acting, trying to understand what that character would be like. By doing that, I think you could really get inside the head of that character.
yeah, totally. I mean, I think going back to Superman for a second too. I mean, there's definitely human qualities to him. Look, he's a
Hmm.
farm boy from Kansas, I believe, right? He loses his stepfather when he's in high school, I think, as well. And I
Well,
mean,
kind
I
of,
think
because,
it's
well, kind of,
right,
right? He was born in
right.
he was
But
born on a
in
different
the
planet, so it goes both
well,
ways.
right, no, but yeah, what I was gonna say though is yeah, oh, totally, it goes both ways. But the things that the movies ought to do more is really dial in on that human side, that Clark Kent side, not the Cal El side.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I mean, I think they did a good job. I think they need to do more movies with Henry Cavill Superman because he was only really given an origin tale, and I thought that was a really good starting ground for the character. Um, I think they could do a lot of cool stuff if they did just featured films focusing on the Superman,
Mm.
and his stories.
Let me ask you, how do you think it is that Superman has sort of died out, right? Like, obviously, it was the first superhero, right, in the 30s, and at the same time, it was so popular throughout, you know, the entire 1900s. But now, once 2000 came around, Batman's incredibly popular. The Joker's incredibly popular, and then you have the entire Marvel franchise. So, what is it that makes DC just or DC Superman not popular?
Well, I don't think that it's not popular, but what I think is this:
Hmm.
the Superman character is literally in every other character. The Tobey Maguire Spiderman movies. I love those.
Yeah,
But one of the
same.
things they do is they make the character godlike. He's not like how he is in the MCU, Tom Holland Spider-Man's, where it really is just this kid, who's thrown into big boy world where he's fighting around with Captain America and Iron Man, right? But
Yeah.
Spider-Man in the Tobey Maguire movies, he literally especially some of the cinematic shots, they set him up as if he really is this godlike figure, especially when he's swinging and the American flags behind him.
Yeah.
That is Superman to the T, in my opinion. And they look at a lot of different of these movies, and you could find those shots, and it's very subtle, but it really is. I really think it's come from Superman. So I think that the character, you wouldn't have all these other characters without Superman. But going back to your initial question, why I think it's kind of died out and we focus more on, the Batmans, the Iron Mans, the Spider-Mans of the world. I think it comes back to, again, we love how incredibly complex those characters are, especially someone like Batman, who, you mentioned earlier, which I thought was great, about how each of us, we have our public life, we have our private life, our public
Yeah.
identity, our private identity, and that is Batman to the T, right? I mean, Batman is this, this Elon Musk centric figure, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, right? But then on the inside, the real Bruce Wayne is this kind of psychotic guy who, is a expert in martial arts, who goes out at night and he fights criminals, in a
Yeah.
bat suit. Um, and I think there's something beautifully complex about that. And with Superman, as I said, I mean, look, there's decades and decades worth of comic books. There's certainly stories in there that you kind of fit those expectations.
Mhm.
Um, but it just comes back to really preying upon those in the movies and teasing those out more, I think. So yeah.
No, I agree, man. I watched. I mean, you look at Batman, and it was funny. At the
Right.
end of the first movie, at the end of Batman Begins, obviously I'm talking about the Nolan trilogy.
Right.
Literally the female figure, right, the girl that he falls in love with, literally says at the end, she goes, she looks at him, and he talks about how he's wearing a mask, right? How, he goes out and he's Batman, right? He wears his Batman mask like a normal
Right.
superhero. And then she goes to him, and she looks at Bruce Wayne, she looks at his person, right? Like the person who he actually is, and says, "This is your mask." Right, this, like, Batman is your
Yeah.
real person, and your mask is your actual face, right, your Bruce Wayne face. And I
Right.
think I
Right.
think it's a really interesting idea, because the problem is that he really can't express himself any other way. Like, he can't be the Batman figure. He can't be the like, he can't integrate Bruce Wayne and Batman. He has to be Bruce Wayne and Batman, because there's just very little, society wouldn't really accept him as Batman.
Well, one of the things, was you were saying that, Iron Man popped in my head. And
Mhm.
even like, so did you ever see like Boardwalk Empire, that HBO show?
No.
um, with Steve Buscemi. Well, it's kind of the same concept where, in that show, Steve Buscemi, he's he's, I think he's Nookie Thompson, and he's he's this mobster who runs basically all of Atlantic City. And at the end of each year, he goes, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna guess before it's too late for me. And then something pulls him back in, and at the end of the show, he gets killed off.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same with Iron Man, right? Where towards the middle to end of that era of the MCU, he kept saying, oh, "I'm going to retire. I'm done with this," and yet he keeps getting pulled back in to the
Yeah.
point where he gets killed in battle. That's it. It makes these characters tragic in a way where their inevitable fate is going to be their eventual demise.
Mm.
And there's something there's something quite beautiful about that, of how selfless they are, right? But I mean, it is sad too that they're going out there knowing that the last time.
That's interesting. No, that's really interesting, because all the heroes, we track them up until their death, right? Like, you look at someone like, man, how many Tony Stark movies were there? There must have been at least 10, right? And obviously Tony Stark was the
Right.
main hero in the Avengers. It's really interesting to see. Why do you think they do that? Why do you think they track them until they die?
Well, I think it goes back to the idea. It goes back to the characters' complexion. Just how complex they are. We all have. It's kind of like an addiction, right? The reason we want people to stay away from drugs is because if you're eventually that addiction's kill you, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same thing. Is that there's a sense of dependency on going out there and saving the world. And maybe a little bit of it is the adrenaline rush, the sense of ego that it gives you, that the world cheers for me because of what I'm capable of. Part of it is just doing what's right. You have these powers, you ought to use them for good.
Yeah.
I think a little mix of all those different things, but just like drug addict or somebody who loves doing crazy stunts, at some point, quit, it's going to kill you. It's kind of, I mean, Harvey Dent said it in The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I think there's perhaps a little bit of truth in that,
Interesting. No, I think it's so there's this quote. There's this quote that's really running through my mind. I forget who is the one who said it, but he said, "You have to be addicted to something. You have to be because you know what?
Right.
So you could say, everyone's technically addicted to something, right? Like the man or the whatever the person who provides for his family is addicted to money in a sense. The person who raises their kids is addicted to their kids in a sense, right? And it's just whatever it is that gives you that sort of high, like that gives you that sort of meaning. And it's interesting to see how as they go through their progression, as they go through their life, we watch that thing that they love eventually kill them. Right? Why is it that
Right. I mean,
yeah, no, go.
no, I was going to say, I mean, it's not to get all dark and droopy, but in a sense, a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, here's I read this author called Carl Jung, and he talks about he's actually the one who created the term archetype. And his idea is that there are two essential storylines in every single movie, or there are two central storylines, and you're going to find one of the two in every single movie. And he says the two storylines are maturity stories, which is humans understanding their first half of life, right? Their first half of life is trying to understand who they are, trying to get situated with this, this body, this mind that we have no idea where it comes from. And then the second type of story is accepting death, right? Because after you've understood who you
Right.
are, then once you turn 40, once you turn 50, once you have that midlife crisis that, or you realize that you're not as alive as you used to be, then you have to spend your time accepting death. So I think it is important to watch these heroes die. I think it is because we could watch them die with courage, right? It's scary to see
Yeah.
that, but it's powerful.
No, well said. Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I do wonder whether or not someone like Tony Stark, like somebody's gonna be like 50 years old, sitting there, somebody who loved Tony Stark when they were a kid, and they're 50, like, let me watch Endgame again because I want to see how he handled it, right? Or that's the story of Jesus, man, right? Like that's the story that pervaded the last 2,000 years of our society, which is the story of Jesus dying on the cross. There's such a powerful message there, as in die with courage, have some sense of meaning, something that will actually make you immortal in a sense.
Right. That's the idea of sacrifice.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that it's just absolutely powerful, and I think that's that. I love watching my heroes die. Honestly, such a sad way of looking at it, but I do. Let me see. All right. I do have one final question for you, and we can wrap this up. So my
Sure.
question is, what do you think? So your book, right, and as well as all hero stories are actually your book especially is about nonconformism, right? Finding yourself in a world
Yes.
where everybody, I guess, looks down upon you, right? And having the courage to break out. So what was it that your character, and what do you think all people should do if they're thinking about really changing their lives, and really not changing their lives in terms of understanding who they are, but they know who they are and they can't express it? What should heroes do? What did Steven do, and what do heroes do to really embrace the person that they are?
Well, I think with Steven, and it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day, but my main character, Steven, one of the biggest lessons that he learned from this, he's not, as I mentioned early in the podcast, he's not as alone as he thinks he is. And I
Mhm.
think that's certainly a message that a lot of us can relate to, especially in this world that we live in now, where we have to prioritize social distancing, and we're a lot more isolated than we're used to in a lot of
Oh yeah.
ways. And I think it's super important to remember that you're not as alone as you think, and there's people who are going through similar issues, people who understand you, understand what you're going through, love and accept you for who you are. And that's one of the key lessons within this book, I think, too, is that you know not all people are bad.
Yeah.
That there is
No.
good in this world. And I actually I start the book with a quote from Harvey Milk, who was a famous LGBT politician, and he said that hope is being able to see that there's darkness at the end of the tunnel. And I think that sums this book up to a T, and life
Yeah.
to a T.
No, I think that's the thing, and especially both of us have been to college, and it's scary because you look at it, and some people, that's the story of Harry Potter. Harry Potter grows up in a household where he is hated, where he's despised, and it's just not his crew. But then all you have to do, in college, we see this, in life, we see this. It's like all you got to do is find yours. All you got to do is find yours, and you'll find those
Right,
people
right.
who love you. You'll find those people who could accept you, even if the masses don't. You're not going to be the only person who's just sitting there and completely different than the rest. We all have this sort of similarity that comes with us.
Right, right. Absolutely. It's well said. I tell you, I wish we met earlier, Nick, in this whole creators program. If we could have had a lot more deep conversations like this one.
Maybe, maybe. Hey, listen, our books are really similar. Yeah, they are. I mean, I think everybody should definitely go take a look. Take a look. My book is going to be in the description. Break Your Bad Habits, 150 pages, a hero's journey. If you're struggling with stuff like that, if you're struggling with overeating, smoking, spending too much time on media, social media, TV, video games, anything like that, I think it's super interesting. And then also, Donovan, tell everybody why they should buy Stephen's War.
Well, right, right. But to my book, let me just say your book, I think, is super important during this time, because I think right now, as I mentioned, with the fact that we're all socially distancing, it's a great chance to self-reflect on who you are and what you want to be. And that's why I think makes your book even more valuable and even more
Yeah.
relatable to these times we live in. And now back, talking about my book, I think that for one, it's a story about, realizing that you're not alone, realizing that you could be the person you want to be, realizing that you need to accept who you are and love who you are. And it's also it's a great, there's a real fun story in there too. I mean, for one, as I said, it's very character driven. It really focuses on this guy who's just trying to figure it out, which I think we could all relate to. We're all just trying to figure it out, but there really is a great story of adventure in there, and there's great little twists and turns. And I definitely pay homage to some of the beloved tropes of the genre as well. So even if you're not like a hardcore superhero fan, this story, I mean, the fact that it really is, it is about this guy, I think that certainly makes it interesting. But if you do love the genre, then it's certainly for you as well. Because I mean, besides the fact that it's super character driven and something that you're going to love, it really does have story. It's the story is really adventurous.
Interesting. Interesting. No, I think everybody should definitely take a look. The link will be in the description below. And Donovan Russo, it was great having you on.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate it. This is wonderful.